Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Explain This. I'm with the star of the show, Robin Riddle. Robin, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
So good to be here with you today.
Absolutely.
And admittedly, as with most of our shows, I'm completely ignorant to this.
This one I can understand. It's okay.
So, guys and gals, the topic of the day is how to track ovulation. I'm starting at ground zero.
Yep.
Tell me what and why and
all the things. All the things. Okay. So again, I do a lot of fertility. And so we talk often about tracking ovulation, both for conception and also for preventing conception. A lot of women are moving more towards a natural family planning, which is track ovulation and avoid those days to avoid getting pregnant.
Yep.
So it works both ways for us.
Yep.
So understanding your menstrual cycles in general, super, super important for trying to conceive or trying to not conceive. Every cycle, there's only about 5 fertile days within the whole cycle. Most women average 28 to 30 day cycles. You've only got about 5 days within that you're actually fertile and going to be able to get pregnant.
Okay.
Or 5 days to avoid. Typically, like I said, 28-day cycles. The beginning of that cycle, the luteal phase, can fluctuate some for people. From ovulation to the time that the next period starts should be 14 days. That's very consistent of 14 days.
Okay.
And so we track all the things to figure out when ovulation happens. Couple of different ways that we can track this. I usually advise my patients to do a combo of most of these things until we figure out exactly what's going on with cycles.
So when you say tracking, it's you're really searching for those 5 days.
Right.
Is that what
we're trying to narrow down when ovulation happens so we know what our fertile window is.
And in general, there is a general time frame, but you got to be super specific.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And there's some different apps out there, and there's apps that I love. Pre-Mom is the one that I tell most of my patients to use to put this information into. If you just log your periods into an app, it'll give you a date that it thinks you're going to ovulate. Those dates are not practical at all unless you are making sure that that's actually what's happening by looking at your physical symptoms going along with it.
Okay. So it's more than just like, looking at
the
days.
math. Yeah,
Okay.
It is.
Okay.
So first thing that I typically like my patients to do is LH tracking. LH stands for luteinizing hormone. This is the hormone that rises and peaks that causes ovulation to occur. So we've got to have a spike in LH prior to ovulation.
Okay. Wow.
Okay.
That's detailed.
It is detailed. So to do LH tracking, we either use these little strips or we use something called OPKs, ovulation predictor kits.
Okay.
I prefer just the little LH strips for my patients. They're a lot cheaper. The ovulation predictor kits are pretty expensive.
Okay.
And if I'm asking someone to do a daily check on this for a couple of months, it's going to get really pricey if we're using the big kits for it. So the process for testing LH involves collecting a urine sample every day, typically midday, like lunchtime to 2 to 3 p.m. is when this level is actually going to peak. So this is not something that we want a first morning urine for. We definitely want to be later into the day because that will affect levels.
Okay.
And when I'm initially coaching patients with this, I'm recommending that we do this every single day, and we are charting this every single day for a couple of months so that we can see what's happening. Because some people will have just one rise that peaks, they ovulate, LH level comes back down. Some people will have 2 rises in their LH, and that first one can happen early, and they may think like, oh, well, that was it, I ovulated. But then they didn't. And later, a second LH rise and drop can happen.
Am I just making this up in my head, or is those rises going to be super fast? Like,
typically it's quick.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like one day
Like
it's
down
not
to the
there,
hour?
the next day that it's there. It actually can be. If you get really in depth with it and you can actually chart, you can do testing every couple hours and see it rising throughout the day and then dropping.
Wow.
I try not to get my patients that into it because I don't want this to like ruin
Right.
your life of having to like pee on strips every 5 minutes.
Right.
But typically levels are going to rise around cycle day 10 to 12, usually going to peak around cycle day 13 to 14, which means once we see that LH peak, typically ovulation is occurring within 24 to 48 hours after that peak of LH.
Okay.
So that helps us know, okay, ovulation's coming. That's why we call them ovulation predictor kits. Like I said, I recommend tracking typically about 3 months prior to starting to try to conceive so that we're learning that cycle. Also, if we're using this as a way to not conceive, we need to be charting this for several months before we're relying on this. And it can change a little bit every month. One month you can peak on day 10, the next month it can be day 12. It's not always exact science with it. It can change a little bit.
And that's kind of the purpose behind it. It's almost like a process versus, you know, a one-time thing. Okay, I know that this is when I'm peaking versus not.
Yeah, because it's not set in stone. It does change a lot.
Okay.
So we just need to start to learn those cycles. So we track for a couple months to learn those cycles. Like I said, best to collect midday. We can use the OPKs, the ovulation predictor kits. These are kind of like a pregnancy test where you just dip it into the urine and then it either comes up with like a smiley face or no smiley face. But again, I prefer the little strips. We can actually see the lines start to darken on those strips. So when you're looking at an LH test strip, there are always going to be two lines on it. You have a control line and you have your test line. And the test line will always be there to an extent. It's not like a pregnancy test where there's one line, two if you're pregnant. There's always going to be two lines there. But that test line is the line that starts to darken as LH levels go up. So typically a peak LH is going to be a dark line on both sides. So control and test line are going to be dark, typically about the same color.
Okay.
Whenever you're doing these tests, you have to dip, you have to lay the strip down, you have to give it at least 5 to 10 minutes. These tests need to dry before we are like counting the result, because wet with the evap lines or evaporation lines is going to look a little bit different than a fully dried test is. Okay. So dip your test, leave it for 10 minutes, come back and look at it. I recommend either taking pictures of this daily so that you have a log through like your camera phone, or using an app like Premom, which is going to have a section in there where you can take a picture and it logs it for you every day. So it keeps a picture of the strip for you, and it's also going to give you a predicted value. So it'll say like, oh, LH is 0.3 today, and at peak it'll tell you it's 1.2. Those values aren't super accurate, but it does just help you recognize when those levels are hitting kind of their top. So this is a good way to know when ovulation is getting ready to come.
Because you're 12 to 24 hours before peak.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Positive LH strips does not confirm ovulation. I always stress that to patients. If we're thinking that you might be having cycles where you're not ovulating, just because you get a positive ovulation predictor does not confirm ovulation.
Okay.
This is saying it should be coming, but it does not confirm that it happens. Another method that we look at is looking at cervical mucus. So this tells a lot about fertility. Hormonal fluctuations throughout the month are going to start to change the mucus coming from the cervix. So closer to ovulation, that mucus is going to start to get very like slippery and thicker. It looks like raw egg whites is what it should be looking like. If we're not having proper cervical mucus changes, that does tell us that there may be some hormonal issues going on that we need to be dealing with. So this is actually a really big sign. Some women don't like tracking this one, but it actually is a really big sign for fertility. If we don't have good cervical mucus, probably not as fertile as we should be. That's like the transport for the sperm. Okay. And so we need that. Things that can help with this, staying super hydrated really helps with getting that positive cervical mucus change. So we've got to make sure that we're staying well hydrated, especially around ovulation time. The big one that I super love and want everybody doing is basal body temperature tracking.
What is that? I hear this. I hear that all the time. Basal.
Well, your ring does it. The Aura ring does it. So you're tracking. Yeah. So tracking your basal body temperature is looking for a change in temperature throughout the cycle. So this one does not predict ovulation. Like it can't tell us when it's coming, but it tells us after it's happened. So we will get a rise. Oh. Females have a rise in their resting basal body temperature pre-ovulation versus post-ovulation. Okay. Typically, there's a 0.5 degree to a full degree change in what your temperature is running pre-ovulation versus post-ovulation.
But is that helpful because for the following month you can?
It helps us kind of triangulate. Like, okay, LH happened here. Basal body temperature rose here, so ovulation probably was one of these 2 days. Okay. So it helps us to really narrow things down. Okay. Because typically that basal body temperature rises about 24 hours after ovulation has happened.
Interesting.
So that lets me know for my patients, yes, more than likely you did ovulate that cycle. Just helps to track everything a little bit better.
Is that something that, would you suggest people get like an Apple Watch or this, or is
So
it
there's
in the
lots of
app?
options. There's lots of options. You can literally just buy a basal body temperature thermometer for like $5 off of Amazon.
Okay.
The difference between that and a regular thermometer is that it goes two numbers past the decimal.
Okay.
So like your temperature would be 97.86 instead of just 97.8.
Got it.
2 decimal points. So it's just a little bit more accurate. Oral thermometer, oral basal body temperature thermometer is fine. You can do an Oura ring. For people who forget to take their temperature in the morning, a device is super helpful.
Yeah.
So newer Apple Watches will track it. Oura ring can do it. There's things like Temp Drop is like an arm one that you can wear every night. So there's a lot of different options for this, but it can be cheap and easy. And you just keep this thermometer by your bed. You do have to check your temperature around the same time every day. So if one day you're getting up at 5 a.m. and the next day you're not getting up till 10 a.m., that can cause some normal fluctuations. So that makes it a little bit tougher. Critical to check temperature before you get out of bed. So first thing in the morning, open your eyes, you roll over, pick up your thermometer, check your temperature. Once you get up and get moving, that is going to fluctuate the temperature some. So again, for people who tend to have a hard time remembering that, or they just jump out of bed, Oura ring is a great way to do it because it's tracking your temperature constantly for you.
Okay.
Again, Premom app is great for this. There is also an app called Natural Cycles that links to an Oura ring, and it will track all these things for you as well.
So everything we've been talking about goes into these apps.
Yeah, Premom, everything goes into Premom. Okay. Natural Cycles does a lot of the same stuff, and it links to the Oura ring, so it will pull your temperature information from the ring, link it into the app, and show you how fertility is going within the app.
Got it.
Super cool. Super cool. So again, like I said, prior to ovulation, temperature tends to run a little bit lower. Most women, I see them like somewhere in the 97s. Post ovulation, we see a good spike on that chart, and we're running like in the 98s for the rest of the cycle.
Okay.
It should go up and it should stay up for the rest of the cycle. So the whole luteal phase, the second half of the cycle, it should stay up.
Okay.
Okay. And again, a combination of these methods is typically what I'm recommending for all of my patients.
So it's not an either or. It's not a, well, I get the LH and the basal.
Yeah.
But you also kind of
I encourage cervical mucus as well, just so we know what's going on there, because that is big for fertility.
Okay.
So especially for someone who's been struggling with getting pregnant, we want to be looking at all the things because it's all factors.
Okay.
And again, our goal is just to narrow down that fertile window so that we know when to target intercourse. Again, it's only about a 5-day window. So whenever we know we're moving into that fertile window, I typically recommend that people are having intercourse every other day. And then day of ovulation, day after ovulation.
Oh, okay.
Sperm can live in the body for up to 5 days. Egg only lives for 24 hours. So the goal is have sperm there waiting for the egg to come out.
Sure.
So it's got something to meet with.
Sure.
If we're trying to not get pregnant, then the goal is don't have anything there. And so it helps either way.
Right.
And then sometimes we need to pull some blood work too and get involved with labs. So labs are going to be the most accurate way to confirm that ovulation is occurring. We draw a progesterone level typically about 7 days post predicted ovulation is when we're going to want to look at that progesterone level. This typically falls, if you have a 28-day cycle, that would be around day 19 to 21. We would be doing blood work for that progesterone level. Any level of 3 or higher on progesterone tells us that ovulation has happened, but a good ovulatory response, a good progesterone response, is going to be a progesterone level of 10 to 15 or higher. So that's what I'm looking for.
By good, what does that mean? Like you're ovulating?
You've ovulated. It's a good, strong ovulation. The body's producing progesterone. So if you were to get pregnant, we have the progesterone there to maintain that pregnancy.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So in a lot of like the assisted reproductive stuff, IUI, IVF, sometimes they'll just go ahead and start people on progesterone. But if they don't, like if you do an IUI, they don't start you on progesterone. They'll monitor those levels. If your level's not over 10, they'll start you on progesterone at that point. That way, if you are pregnant, you've got the progesterone there that you need to maintain that pregnancy.
Okay, so the progesterone is not necessarily to track ovulation, but to make sure that that everything's the way it needs to be.
Right. So progesterone happens because you ovulate.
Got it.
The body releases the egg. Corpus luteum starts to produce progesterone.
Got it.
And so that's why you have progesterone, but we need to make sure that the body's producing enough to maintain that potential pregnancy.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So positive rise in progesterone would tell us definitely you are ovulating. We're having a good ovulation, good progesterone response and all of that.
And that's the only lab that you're really needing in
That's-
addition to the other methods.
Yeah, that's the one that's going to tell me that ovulation has happened.
Interesting.
Yeah,
And I knew nothing about this
Yeah.
10 minutes ago.
I know. That's
Like,
what I'm here
no,
for.
this was awesome. How to track ovulation. Guys, I hope this was helpful. Robin, this was awesome. Like, super
Okay.
helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Guys, you name it, we explain it. We will see y'all next time.
Don't go away.